and dying in your beds many years from now, would you be willing to trade all the days from this day to that for one chance, just one chance, to come back here and tell our enemies that they may take our lives, but they'll never take our freedom?
And welcome to Anti-Tyranny News Radio here on UCY.TV. Thank you for joining me this evening. Oh, Chat and Go's been having some problems. So we do have a new chat room, so make sure you go to UCY.TV/ATN and join us in the chat room, and always some interesting people in there and great ideas and discussions, so check it out there. I kind of want to get into where we are with our economy, the situation the U.S. is in. We definitely have a situation where when you look at how the world has cycled through history, every empire eventually falls. And I think the world is basically tired of the U.S. claiming the moral authority to be policemen of the world. You might argue the fact or whatnot, but it's one of those things that you look at it and eventually another nation, another empire will become the world power. And I've talked multiple times about Russia and China working together, citing on countries like Iran and a lot of South American countries, and starting to trade in their own currencies and going off of the petrodollar. It's something that really threatens the U.S. when it comes to the value of our dollar. Now, that's because we have a corrupt system, which involves the Federal Reserve, and this continual printing press. And we've been set up to be put in this situation eventually. By this time, though, the people that helped set it up have gained astronomical amounts of wealth and can basically disappear and allow America or any other country that they've done this to collapse into chaos. And I think a lot of it is really coming to head, and you're seeing it with the protests and the ability for provocateurs to turn it violent. And I'm glad to see some that that have been called out, which I'll get into that later. But I kind of want to stay on this economy thing right now. Here's a short clip where Ben Swan interviewed Peter Schiff and how we are now number 2 to the Chinese. And we'll just go ahead and get into it.
Well, it is official. The United States is now number 2. The Chinese economy just overtook the U.S. to become the largest in the world. And it's really not a surprise here. Interestingly, as the U.S. slipped from being the leading economic power in the world, mainstream media has virtually ignored the story. I spoke earlier with the president of Euro-Pacific Capital, Peter Schiff. I began by asking him why the story is being ignored.
Well, first of all, I wasn't shocked by it. I've been expecting China's economy to surpass the United States. In fact, right now it's only surpassed it when you adjust for purchasing power parity. But I think maybe by over the next 10 years or so, it could surpass it without making those adjustments, just on a dollar level. And I think that will happen when the Chinese abandon their currency peg and allow their currency to rise. And I think it'll rise substantially against the dollar, and that will dramatically improve their economy. It'll improve the purchasing power of their citizens, and it will enable China to truly surpass the United States. And frankly, they might have already done that had they not adopted this foolish currency policy years ago.
Now, last year, it was China that surpassed the U.S. in global trade. Now, as we mentioned, it's in terms of goods and services. Are we getting kind of used to the idea that China is, as you mentioned, gradually over time kind of surpassing the U.S. on multiple levels here economically?
Well, I don't know that we're getting used to it, but we're going to have to, because I think ultimately it's going to mean a big diminishment in the standard of living for Americans when the Chinese reclaim their production for themselves and stop exporting what they make to America and stop loaning us all this money. You know, if you look at the most recent trade figures, China just posted its largest trade surplus ever. At the same time, America just posted its biggest trade deficit ever in manufactured goods.
All right, so let's talk about that for a minute, because I hear people say all the time, well, this doesn't matter. The only reason the Chinese economy is so large is because the U.S. buys all that stuff that China creates cheaply. As you're pointing out, eventually, though, that whole argument goes away, does it not? Because there is going to be a shift coming.
Well, China's economic growth is not thanks to our generosity in accepting all their output. It's their effort that produced it in the first place. It's Chinese factories. It's Chinese capital investment in Chinese labor that is growing the Chinese economy, not American consumption. I think, if anything, we're a drag on the Chinese economy. I think if China wasn't foolishly subsidizing American consumption, the Chinese would be enjoying falling domestic prices, and they would be buying all the goods that are turning out of Chinese factories, and their economy and their standard of living would be much stronger as a result.
Because that might be the case, do you think that China would then, at some point in the near future, decide to stop, as you use the word, subsidizing Americans with those cheap products?
Well, absolutely. In fact, that's why I think the Chinese have been accumulating so much gold, and why I think they continue to be big buyers of gold, is they are preparing to jettison the dollar as their principal reserve, and I think they're going to eliminate the peg. And again, when they do, that's going to be the birth of a new renaissance in China. You're going to really see China rise to a much greater degree, and that's going to be the sun setting on the American century. Because without China's support, we're going to have to finally deal with the problems that have been building up in our economy for years, but China has spared us having to deal with those problems.
Peter, the U.S. is in an interesting position right now, simply because there is not a single generation of Americans left who really remember what it was like for the U.S. to not possess the world's reserve currency in the dollar. It sounds like all of that is coming to an end. You mentioned that the sun setting here on the American century. As the sun is beginning to set on that, what do we have to look ahead to for the next decade here in the U.S.?
Well, a lot of it is going to depend on how we react to this, rude awakening that we're in store for. But I think Americans today, younger Americans, really have no idea of just how truly prosperous America used to be back in, the 1950s, for example. The real wealth of this nation that had been built up over years of free enterprise, limited government, sound money. We were a much stronger economy, and we lived a much higher standard of living. Remember, back in the 1950s, a man who didn't even graduate high school could support a family, support his children, support his wife who didn't have a job, save for retirement, not have debt. We had a true middle class in this country that had tremendous purchasing power and very little debt. And that doesn't exist today. I mean, a lot of countries have caught up to America because we've encumbered ourselves with so much government and regulations. But I think now some of these countries that have been holding themselves back are really going to increase their lead when they jettison this dollar system. So we're going to have to come to terms with this. We're going to only be able to consume in America to the extent that we can produce. And right now we can't produce because we don't have the capacity. We've got a bloated education sector and healthcare sector and service sector. Meanwhile, we've been gutting our industrial sector, and we've been relying on the generosity and stupidity of the rest of the world to produce the things that we can't and lend us the money that we don't save. And when we have to wake up to that reality, it's going to be a big change in America. And hopefully it will motivate us to make some key structural political changes that will unleash the free market spirit that originally built this country, and that is going to be so necessary to build it back up again after it collapses.
When you use...
Okay, I'm going to stop it right there, because he really talked about a lot of things that I've been saying for quite a long time. And to really get into more of the details of what he's talking about, and this has to be the whole inflation thing and us not producing anymore. And, I heard a so-called economic professional, I don't know if they were advisor or exactly who they were, but they, it was one of the talk shows, and they were talking about, well, I don't see China doing that because they hold so much of our bonds, and that doesn't really hold their currency up if they're holding that much of our bonds. And if they crash the dollar, it won't be worth anything. Well, when Peter Schiff was talking about that peg, he's talking about the fact that China has purposely devalued their money artificially. Their yen, I think is what it is worth more than what they say it is. So when they pull that peg and that value of their currency can go up, which they backed with gold, that's the thing that we're going to lack in. They backed it with gold. And if they get us off of the petrodollar, the U.S. dollar not being used as the petrodollar, there's two strikes right there. That means that all those Apple factory workers that have been making a little bit of money, well, now that little bit of money is going to also all of a sudden be able to purchase quite a bit of money or goods. Their currency is going to be worth a lot more. And if they're not exporting to the U.S., which when we can afford bread, we're not going to be importing too much from China when it comes to their TVs and electronics and all that they make. They'll be able to purchase that. Their economy will blossom. And I think this has been a plan that's been in the making for China. Russia plays their part in this because they're tired of the U.S. being a world power that can push them around and control the United Nations and always make Russia look worse than the U.S. when I really don't see that big of a difference. Other than we've had a economy that was blossoming while Russia had one that was crashing. So we've experienced a lot more ability to purchase things. And like he was saying, there was a time where, a high school graduate could work a job, support a wife that didn't work, a family, save for retirement. And, we have college graduates that they can't get a job that pays them anything, definitely in the field that they're in. They have this enormous debt, so they have to live with their parents to pay off a debt. Because we don't do anything anymore. That's one thing that why I'm working on these projects that I'm trying to get rolling. I'm waiting for some more equipment to show up. But we have to do more than just talk. We have to be able to have people visualize things. And that's why I'm trying to put together some mini documentaries, basically. And, we have an opportunity that the internet has given us. And I think that we really grabbed a hold of it at the beginning, and we've kind of petered off. We can do a lot better. And we've been divided for a while. But what we need to do is realize the same things we were realizing when Ron Paul was running for president and you had all that hope. If you're one of those people. Or, that hope that some of you had that maybe there will be a turning tide. Well, there is. And it's that we're not going to remain the world power. There is a turning point coming, and China is working on that. And Russia is helping, and there's a lot of other nations that are working alongside them. We have to start working together once again to really bring the message to the masses. And there's people that I've seen that have kind of just faded off into oblivion. People that I really liked the work they did. Yeah, I mean, they were doing great, informative work that was educational, but the creativeness behind it allowed it to be popular, even though it was something that was educational. People absorbed it, and with them teetering off the way they have, it's really almost depressing. But I think that we have a chance here to really get people involved out there visually, for people to receive the message of freedom, the idea that you can be a free person, because we're going to need it when we collapse, because we will either be completely militarized. I can't even speak today, but we're going to have a complete police state where martial law will be enacted, that we will become slave labor to the dwindling, collapsing system as they try to control it. It's going to resemble probably Hunger Games, where you have DC is the luxury where all the elitists are at, or, who knows where they'll be. But they might even be in another country, which would probably be likely. And they would divide and conquer us. But we also have a chance to start exercising free market and the ability to operate outside of a system that is seeking control. And that's why I think the law enforcement out there that are people that really do want to just help their community out, keep it safe, really need to start exercising their ability to say, hey, I'm not going to enforce these laws that only bring more violence to a community. I choose to go after the murderers, the rapists, the thieves, the people that there's an actual victim behind. The people that are abridging someone else's right. Because right now, it doesn't look good for us. Here's one out of the economiccollapseblog.com. It's been a while since I read one out of here. This one's titled, Guess What Happened the Last Time the Price of Oil Crashed Like This? There has only been one other time in history when the price of oil has crashed by more than $40 in less than 6 months. The last time this happened was during the second half of 2008, and the beginning of that oil price crash preceded the great financial collapse that happened later that year by several months. Well, now it is happening again, but this time the stakes are even higher. When the price of oil falls dramatically, that is a sign that the economic activity is slowing down. It can also have a tremendously destabilizing effect on financial markets. As you will read about below, energy companies now account for approximately 20% of the junk bond market. And that junk bond implosion is usually a signal that a major stock market crash is on the way. So if you are looking for a canary in the coal mine, keep your eye on the performance of energy junk bonds. If they begin to collapse, that is a sign that all hell is about to break loose on Wall Street. Yes, the U.S. now actually produces more oil than either Saudi Arabia or Russia. This revolution has resulted in the creation of millions of jobs since the last recession, and it has been one of the key factors that has kept the percentage of Americans that are employed fairly stable. Unfortunately, the shale oil boom is coming to an abrupt end. As a recent Vox article discussed, OPEC has essentially declared a price war on U.S. shale oil producers. Here in a small quote, all intents and purposes, OPEC is now engaged in a price war with the United States. What that means is that very cheap to pump oil out of the places like Saudi Arabia and Kuwait, but it's more expensive to extract oil from shale formations in places like Texas and North Dakota. So as the price of oil keeps falling, some U.S. producers may become unprofitable and go out of business. The result, oil prices will stabilize and OPEC maintains its market share. If the oil stays at this level or continues falling, we will see a significant number of U.S. shale oil companies go out of business and large numbers of jobs will be lost. The Saudis know how to play hardball, and they are absolutely ruthless. In fact, we have seen this kind of scenario happen before. Robert McNeil, a White House advisor to former President George W. Bush and president of the Radian Group Energy Consultancy, told Reuters that Saudi Arabia will accept a price decline necessary to sweat whatever supply cuts are needed to balance the market out of the U.S. shale oil sector. Even legendary oil man T. Boone Pickett believes Saudi Arabia is in a standoff with U.S. drillers and frackers to see how the shale boys are going to stand up to the cheaper price. This has happened once before. By the mid-1980s, all oil output from Alaska's North Slope and the North Sea came online. Combined production of around 5 to 6 million barrels a day. OPEC set off a price war to compete for market share. As a result, the price of oil sank from around $40 to just under 10 a barrel by 1986. But the energy sector has been one of the only bright spots for the U.S. economy in recent years. If the sector starts collapsing, it's going to have a dramatic negative impact on our economic outlook. For example, just consider the following numbers from a recent Business Insider article. Specifically, if prices get too low, the energy companies won't be able to cover the cost of production in the U.S. This spending by energy companies, also known as capital expenditures, is responsible for a lot of jobs. The energy sector accounts for roughly 1/3 of S&P 500 capex and nearly 25% of combined capex and R&D spending, Goldman Sachs Snyder writes. Now, you can read the rest of that at the economiccollapseblog.com. I think we've been preparing for this, many of us. We've seen a collapse coming. And we don't know if this will just be the tip of the collapse or this will be the main collapse. Different things could spark off a collapse. We could have a civil war. Many things can happen. And this could be just the tip of the iceberg. It really could. If this is what breaks the back of America, it could spark off something even worse, and we never know what will happen. We could have America's, fall into decay. We could have it turn into chaos, and we could have foreign troops on our soil. We have a police state, basically. I was talking about before, but really we have one now. But as we see, something that's been in the headlines is for the first time in like 20 years or so, more people favor or support gun rights than oppose. Even though it's always been right there in that 50% range, we have people realizing that, well, maybe taking guns away hasn't done anything productive. Um, we definitely, I believe, see that when we look at Chicago, New York, maybe California. Give me a second here. Anywhere that we've really seen guns restricted or treated as a criminal act, you tend to see more violence. There's a nearby city that its population is growing, but it definitely has, with the inner city people, is a very liberal leaning community, and that's across most of the races. It's not just one. And really the only people you see with guns are the criminals. And I do see a change in that attitude, though, where they're going, no one else is going to protect us. We need a gun, too. And I hope most of them are at least doing a legal way. That way their gun rights don't get taken away from them by having, possessing a gun, maybe carrying it on them without a permit. Even though I don't believe that you should have a permit, tends to be something good to do when you're exercising that right. Here in Indiana, we have a shall issue state, so as long as you're not a felon, you'll get you a gun permit. We're also one of the few states that offer a lifetime concealed carry, so you can go apply and get a lifetime. So it's one of those things that there are many problems with Indiana. Definitely with some of the, like I say, more liberal cities, but there's also some perks, and just stay out of the liberal cities and you're usually not too not too threatened by others. There's always going to be crime. There's always going to be violence at times, and no matter how much we try to stop it, it'll happen. But that's why we can't allow people to say, hey, we're taking your rights away, because there's people that have violated those rights. Well, if they're violating the right, meaning they're not, obeying the law, like you can't just go up and shoot people you disagree with. Can't use violence on others. That you want to take my right to own a gun away. It doesn't work. It just will never work. Okay. Trying to figure out where I want to go from here. I got a few options. I think I'll go this route. Give me a second here. Have a little bit of issues, so. I'm going to do it this way, just go through channel. I hate when this happens, but it seems to happen quite a bit often. I think my internet's being bogged down by something or someone. I've just been having issues. My internet's not as fast as it was in the past, and it keeps telling me it is, and I've been really monitoring what's running and everything, and I'm not getting the response out of it. And it's probably about time I go through and update a few things too. Seems like there's always an update. Okay. I think it's going to work now. Now, one thing that is really led to a lot of the world not wanting America to be involved in policing the world, and we just had these CIA torture crap come out, and well, you wonder why? People defending their home from outsiders, and we treat them as criminals. Some of them turned out to be our own informants. Oh yeah, that's going to make people like us even more. Here's from We Are Change. The U.S. government is lying, manipulating, continuing torture.
What many people fail to realize about the U.S. torture report that came out is the fact that the U.S. government still continues to torture people. The mainstream media is being manipulated, and there's other actions committed by the government that are a lot worse than torture. Now, Mark Udall, senator, on the House Senate floor, gave a very astounding, amazing speech where he detailed the fact that the CIA is lying, just outright manipulating and lying what's really happening. He also went into detail how the CIA knew that there was no actual intelligence, but wanted to confirm that by still continuing their demonic, evil torture against human beings, some of which were totally innocent. And they knew that. And just that very fact alone is astounding. The White House press secretary was also confronted recently with the fact that John Brennan and James Comey, Obama's national security team, are the architects of this horrible, inhumane torture program. And he never, of course, dealt with the question. He never answered the reporter who asked him about the contradictions, about the moral authorities to still have these individuals. He never addressed how the White House was trying to stop this report from coming out in the first place. Yes, Barack Obama did not want this report from coming out. He tried to censor it. But luckily, it still came out, even though that the CIA is still lying about it, even though that the article is still heavily redacted. Mark Udall also said he wanted a copy to see the report unredacted. And of course, John Brennan denied him that right to see the full report unredacted. Just utterly insane. There's also Senate staffers who go on Wikipedia and try to get rid of the word torture and replaced it with interrogation program. The New York Times and NPR also don't mention torture. They just say interrogation program, enhanced interrogation. No, it's torture. There's also an interesting article by the Daily Mail talking about how the whole Zero Dark 30 movie is put into doubt because it was based on information that was given to them by the CIA. Now, the director and producer of Zero Dark 30, Catherine Bigelow, was given information by the CIA. And of course, with this new intelligence report that just came out, it was all lies. In the movie Zero Dark 30 that talks about the assassination of how the U.S. government was able to capture and kill Osama bin Laden, there's a scene in the movie where an individual is tortured and gives information to the U.S. government about where Osama bin Laden is. That's all bull crap. So is the show 24, which on TV in the early 2000s talked about how torture was necessary to stop terrorism. That's all lies. Mark Udall says it. The report says it. If you do your homework, it makes clear and perfect sense. Even on Reddit, the torture report made the front page. It was the fifth most popular post on the front page of Reddit about the U.S. torture report. And then someone on Reddit took down the post and replaced it with an old one from about 3 years ago. And they replaced it with an old post that was getting no upvotes, no attention, no comments, about the fact that the Soviet army raped over 2 million German women after defeating Nazi Germany in World War II. So that's a very interesting fact that this is happening even on Reddit. So, as you can see, even on Reddit, the torture report is being censored and replaced with propaganda against Russia. The Senate staffers are going on Wikipedia trying to get rid of the word torture. And, of course, the CIA is still lying and manipulating these very facts. Now, we know that for a fact. I actually talked to James Woolsey, former CIA director. This is what I had to ask him. This was all the way back in 2011.
Former CIA Director William Cozy in 1976 said the CIA controls and owns everybody in major significance in the mainstream media. How do you think that relates in 2011?
Bill Colby said that?
Yeah. He's on record stating that as a fact. Saying the Central Intelligence
Agency around shortly after that, it's hard to talk to him about it, but I had never heard that Bill said something like that. He's a very sensible guy. It's certainly not true. There's got to be some kind of misunderstanding.
Do you have a comment on Operation Mockingbird, possibly? What? Operation Mockingbird?
What's Mockingbird?
What?
It's a CIA operation that infiltrates mainstream media and tries to control them. It's declassified.
If you describe it, I don't think If you describe it, I don't think
whenever you get a chance, just look up Operation Mockingbird. It's declassified government documents.
The interview continued, even though James Woolsey tried to deny the fact that there was even a House Intelligence Committee meeting in 1975 that detailed how major people of significance in the mainstream media were being paid or working for or working with the Central Intelligence Agency, and how the CIA infiltrated any significant media outlet in the 70s. If you think this is still not continuing, why would James Woolsey, the former CIA director, even deny the fact of Operation Mockingbird? You can watch this video. It's in the description below. But there's other things happening behind the scenes. Torture is still continuing by the U.S. government. It's called rendition. Rendition is just outsourcing torture. Barack Obama has made many statements. The media is making many statements now. He had one on Christmas Day in 2009 saying that, we stopped torture. We didn't. Torture's gone. We're not torturing anybody. Of course you're not. You're just hiring other countries or contractors or large corporations to do the torturing for you. And it's still continuing. What also is very important that we're not being told about is that over 100 prisoners died in Abu Ghraib, the prison in Iraq where the CIA operated and tortured people as well. There's not a report on this fact as well. Now the current report talks about one death from the torture program in Guantanamo Bay, but there's over 100 deaths at Abu Ghraib, the prison in Iraq that the CIA operated in. And again, this is an article by the Washington Post. Rendition continues under Obama despite due process concerns. So now instead of just the CIA torturing people, they hire one of their major contractors and they outsource it. It's still continuing. No, we ended torture in 2009. No, you didn't. You're still continuing it. Mainstream media is still being manipulated and lied, whether that's the fact that Operation Mockingbird still continues or not. They're still framing this debate as torture's over. This is horrible. Let's move on. But obviously, they're still lying. They're still manipulating. There's still other actions being committed by the government that are worse than torture, like the deposition matrix, which is Obama's kill list, which is Obama saying and putting into action the fact that he has every right to kill any human being, including a U.S. citizen, without the due process of law. Obama's deposition matrix is still in play. It's still going on. Maybe that's going to come out when he leaves office, just like this report's coming out. And no one is actually calling for prosecution in the mainstream media. clear fact. If you torture people, you lie to people, you manipulate people, you deserve to face charges for your horrible actions. No one's talking about that, are they? If you found this video informational, share it with your friends so they can get the real honest truth about the torture report. And don't forget to subscribe. We're going to have a lot more videos coming your way here on We Are Change.
WeAreChange.org. We Are Change on YouTube. We've already known for a long time that they've been using waterboarding. This stuff has been coming out. What this does is it spurs up more conflict. And I kind of look at everything going on. If we lose oil, the last industry left in the U.S. that's thriving is, well, government and military. The military-industrial complex, the prison-industrial complex, the police state. Everything else is consumerism that's based off of foreign goods. And when our dollar's not worth anything, we can't afford that stuff. You have the police state left. That's why we need to start in small quantities within our communities to start producing ourselves things that we use and we need and we like. Instead of throwing your old, let's say you got a flat screen and something went out in the little flat screen you got, instead of throwing it out, keep it. Put a little ad in Craigslist that you'll take, broken plasmas and LED TVs, and, well, you find two alike eventually, and you can slap both of them together to make one working one. We're not relying on others. Refurbishing things is something you can do, and it can produce. What factories we still have, hopefully, maybe they'll see a boom in exportation. We might become the old China. We'll be the new China, and they'll be the old U.S. We'll be the old China, they'll be the old U.S. They'll produce, they'll have a thriving economy, and we'll be slowly starting production in a very, very minimal way where we're paid very, very few dollars that can buy very, very few things. But if we can produce homestead building things, there's plenty of people out there that are good working on things. Making cars in your garage from scratch. Because you know what? If the economy completely collapses, why not have everybody just abandon all the regulation that's placed upon you and your neighbors that you can't just build you a car and go drive it? Be that rebel, but be it in a productive way for society. That civil disobedience, if we're at that point. We become that where you're out there with the shovel digging holes for a loaf of bread. But one thing that could even push us over the edge is a $15 minimum wage. A lot of people forget about that. I'm thinking, well, one of the small factories that I do work at, their product that they make, they can really only go so high on what they charge. Otherwise, factories overseas can easily outbid them on deals. And well, if you raise minimum wage $15 an hour, that means the percentage of everybody else's wage needs to go up a certain amount, and they wouldn't be able to compete in the marketplace. This is a company that right now is doing very well for the conditions that they're under. And I think it's because it is still a smaller company, family owned, local owned. They actually take pride in what they're trying to put out there. But, there's only so much they can do. For them to be profitable, they would basically have to move to Mexico or China or something, which I doubt they would even do. But that's what things like that can do to the companies that are still left. Everybody talks about making a wage, no jobs out there. Well, if you keep going, well, we at McDonald's flipping burgers demand $15 an hour. Well, you're running out the last few good jobs that pay more than what McDonald's pays. For them to compete in the market, they would have to pay what McDonald's pays at that point. And who's going to work in a hot factory when they can go to McDonald's and get my order wrong? That's my experience with McDonald's. But we definitely have to look at our own markets, our own free markets, and Bitcoin's an example of how there's this underground free market that is actually prospering. Let me bring up see what Bitcoin's at right now. I have a Bitcoin ticker here. Looks about 352, which is actually pretty good. It's up 3.63. That's up, depending on which one you're looking at. It's up about 1%. It's still going up from what I'm looking at here. I'm looking at a big graph. And it's been going up. It's had its little dips. And it had its major dip when Mount Gox got busted for their little corrupt run they were doing. But after that, it's recovered, and it's actually doing pretty good. And taking it that you can buy homes, cars, food with Bitcoin. I know that the feds have tried to scare people away from it, but it's become such of a big thing that they can't keep track of it. And it's worldwide. They don't know what to do about it. They're pretty kind of mixed up about what to do. I know Microsoft is kind of messing around with Bitcoin, which I'd be kind of worried about that, but there's already how many other different types of virtual currencies out there that are also popular, and people that will trade in gold and silver, people that will trade for food. You know, there's a lot of bartering. You go to Craigslist and you can barter with people, and they try to scare people away from that by trying to say people are trying to get away with not paying taxes on things and try to go after people, but it's too broad. They can't do it. They're scaring people. They're trying to make you afraid to try that. There's always a inherent risk. There was a point where they were going after people who garage sell. You know, you set up a garage sale, you need to pay taxes on what? No, that's not how a garage sale works. It's one of those things that they want you to fear being able to work without them, even if that means fear them. Okay. I had one here out of liberty.me. And this is 5 lies the government wants you to believe about torture. It says here the Senate Intelligence Committee's study of the Central Intelligence Agency's detention and interrogation program released on Tuesday has been described in such terms as a bombshell, shocking, and appalling. While it may be those things, it doesn't contain much to surprise those who have been critical of the program since it began and were skeptical of the government's arguments in favor of it. The first 24 pages give 20 key findings of the report, describe the program's effectiveness or ineffectiveness and brutality, and the CIA's dishonesty and incompetence in its operation. Journalism on the report has tended to focus on its most shocking details. I suggest that most important things about the program are not in those details, and the report may actually be concealing them by directing our discussion towards sensationalism and partisan accusation. So there are 5 of the government's. Here are 5 of the government's biggest lies about the torture program that most likely won't be discussed widely. Number 1, the report is telling us the whole story. It's no secret that the state keeps secrets and lies about what it does share. The report, in particular, is actually an executive summary of the full report, which is more than 6,700 pages long and will remain classified and hence unavailable to the public until either the state decides it is more politically advantage to release it or someone leaks it. Whichever happens first, the CIA is already condemning the report as a partisan attack on the agency, which may be true but does not change the nature of the findings, which include that the CIA leaked false classified information to journalists, despite the agency's insistence that only terrorists were tortured. The detainees included people who were not even suspected of terrorist affiliations. The number of detainees was constantly and grossly underrepresented. The document cracks the door to a closet full of skeletons, but while critics of the program will talk about those skeletons, we should be mindful that the door actually leads to a vast catacomb. It would be unwise to believe that we have been made privy to anything close to the truth. Number two, the government is surprised by the findings. One of the bases on which the report is being criticized is its partisan origins. We can agree that the criticism, to the extent that the present administration and his party will benefit from the release of the information, but let us not be led to believe that Democrats were innocent of the knowledge it contains. Hillary Clinton, for example, has a history of close ties to the program, and in 2009 personally intervened to stop the release of evidence in the case of an Ethiopian refugee to Britain who was tortured under the program. The report was somewhat conciliatory towards George W. Bush, indicating that he did not know the nature and extent of the program and was surprised to learn about it. Cheney now claims that the report is false on that point. Now that I recommend trusting Mr. Cheney necessarily, but if he's being earnest, that supports the proposition that the report is slanted to obscure knowledge that high officials had about the program. And it goes on, don't we really understand that, well, this stuff has been going on. We've known about it. We know the government lies about these things. Why this is being released, why it's being talked about. I think it's being used to further a agenda that I don't know the depths of. I don't know how far this agenda is going to end up leading. Where does it go? Are they trying to completely collapse the U.S.? Or are they trying to really revolutionary socialist agenda, fascist agenda, whatever you want to call it, communist, Marxist? What is actually happening? Because it seems more and more that they're just trying to collapse us. Maybe that collapse us into a socialist society. That's where the police state will come into play. Give me a second here. I want to play this because I was talking about Bitcoin, and I really do think Bitcoin is revolutionary. I think there is something about Bitcoin that has allowed us to explore a alternative path. Press for Truth, which I'm not a huge fan of Press for Truth, but they do put out some stuff. Well, a week ago he put out one. This is day one of a new age, and this is Jeffrey Tucker on Bitcoin. That's why I want to play it here. Let's go ahead and cue this up.
All right, so if you wanted to start off by telling us your name and a little bit of what you're doing here today.
Right, my name is Jeffrey Tucker, and I'm the CEO of Liberty.me. So I was invited to Toronto to speak at this wonderful event, and wow, it's better than I expected it would be. This is about probably my fourth or fifth Bitcoin conference I've been to. They're always unique, because one of the things you find is that everybody's very smart, and people are sort of thinking about the future in a very progressive, optimistic way. And you always learn so much at these events. And people aren't just sitting around grousing about government, which I do all the time. But here, people are looking for solutions. So it's a nice place to be.
And what does liberty mean to you?
What does liberty mean to liberty to me means the freedom to create surprises in the world and to experience new things. Freedom is just connected to progress in some ways. By progress, I mean ever more advancement towards the ideal of human flourishing for all people in the world. To me, that's the essence of liberty.
Is there space within the libertarian movement for lots of people and different ideologies, or how does that work?
Yeah, in fact, I'm slightly even suspicious of the term ideology. I mean, because I think most people are implicitly live as if they're anarchists. I mean, it's part of our nature, sort of buried into our hearts, decided that we should have agency and experience human volition in a cause and effect way. And nobody likes, governments stealing their stuff, and that's what governments basically do. And so to me, libertarianism is a consciousness about what government is and what it isn't, but it's not really necessary to long for freedom. I think all people, all places, and all times long for freedom.
And what for you was the allure to Bitcoin? What got you interested in cryptocurrencies?
Well, when I first came to be an owner of Bitcoin, I sold one bow tie, I think, for 3 Bitcoins about 14 months ago. And once I became an owner and I saw the transfer of the property from peer-to-peer like that, I began to look into it. And I realized that we have missed about a century of innovation in money and payment systems, and that Bitcoin sort of catapults us way into the future. I mean, before Bitcoin, we were using the monetary equivalent of a Model T. With Bitcoin, we're driving a Maserati, essentially. It's that much better. And, the recent history of innovation shows that eventually superior technology replaces inferior technology. National monies are just an inferior technology. If they worked as well, then it's hard to make an argument against them. But the fact is that they don't work. I mean, as far as payment systems are concerned, Bitcoin is so much superior to anything else that exists. Bank transfers take forever. They're super, super costly. Credit card systems use third-party trust agencies. You're subject to financial fraud, all these kinds of things. So from a payment point of view, Bitcoin is like leagues ahead. But just as a money, it's better than national monies. The national monies are just constantly declining in value. They fuel sort of a Leviathan state that's forever expanding. The reason we have debt problems all over the world is basically because of fiat national monies. So Bitcoin is a system based in property rights. The blockchain neatly ties together every Bitcoin or unit of Bitcoin to an actual owner that cannot be reproduced. So it's a very strict system in a way, but that's what you need in money. Money requires many things. It's fungibility, divisibility, but Bitcoin adds to it weightlessness and spacelessness and a radical notion of scarcity, so it becomes basically the perfect money. When I saw that, I was all in.
Is it also about, like as you said, stepping outside of the business of the government or these big banks who are monitoring transactions?
And the problem with the big banks, it's not just about monitoring, it's about controlling. I mean, it's like we have a world in which you're in the system or you're out. Those of us in the system tend to forget about those people who are out. Well, 2-3 billion people or more in the world economy today are outside the system. They're unbanked, they're unable to buy things and sell things, they're talented, they're creative, but they can't be part of the system of division of labor. Something like Bitcoin enables them now to integrate themselves into it. It's going to, I think, in 10 years or so, we're going to see how Bitcoin has unleashed all sorts of human energy that's been sort of kept behind a wall, and that's the cruelty of the current cartelized system. It excludes people. Bitcoin is inclusionary in that way.
Now, I'll play a little bit of a devil's advocate here, and I'm curious is there ever a possibility that the allure to Bitcoin is that you are doing transactions outside of the business of the big banks and the government, but could it be to kind of invite the people who have issues with the government, and because where's it all really coming from, right?
I think a lot of the initial demand for Bitcoin might have been assisted by the desire of people to buy and sell drugs online. I'm not sure about that, but to me that's a totally legitimate thing, because the drug war is preposterous to me. I mean, we shouldn't have a war on pot when every third person is a stoner, which is basically the world we live in. So there should be opportunities for people to buy and sell things online with Bitcoin, but I think it's gone way beyond that. I mean, if Bitcoin advanced and made progress due to illicit activity, that would hardly be unusual. The World Wide Web is itself, as sophisticated as it is, mainly due to the innovations propelled by pornography. So, history is a kind of a funny thing. We make progress in unexpected ways. So, but nonetheless, I think Bitcoin has absolutely entered the mainstream, and quite frankly, even today, if you're planning to money launder or do illicit activity, the dollar is a much better tool than Bitcoin, actually.
Do you think there'll be other cryptocurrencies to soon follow Bitcoin?
There are tens of thousands already extant, and I'm really looking forward to this world of altcoins, radical diversity in coinage. As I say, we're entering into a new world. Nobody knows anything about this world. We didn't know that money could be completely produced privately. We didn't know that we could have a competitive free enterprise system for money until 5 years ago, essentially, and really until about 14 months ago. So this is day one of a new age.
Well, things are vastly changing quickly, and it is exciting times. Where can people go to learn more from you?
Well, my enterprise opens to the public in 10 days. We're beta testing right now. I was just in there this morning. It's a digital city with content distribution, multi-site blogging, opportunities for all members, beautiful forums, and a social network. And just this morning we installed live chat. So it really is a fully integrated city, more sophisticated than anything else that exists. I'm very proud to be running this company. I'm very excited for everybody to see it.
And what's the links? Where can people find you?
Just liberty.me. You can sign up right now and just put your email address. We'll contact you when we're all ready to go. Like I say, we're beta testing right now. Everybody's pretty fired up.
Great. Well, we wish you all the best with that, man. Thanks for talking.
Thank you. Okay. All
right. Thanks. That was fun.
Now, I do understand that Bitcoin's not for everyone. There's some people out there that just are not going to be too involved in electronic type currency. And that's fine. But it's also a example for a lot of the younger generation on how you can not use government-ran currencies that deprive you of your wealth after you receive it. Because, your money's worth less, it seems, every day. Even with the oil prices down, it's going to be temporary help. But like we were talking about earlier, it's not going to last. Now, I've kind of looked at a lot of the issues going on, and what I'm more worried about is how they are going to basically start, using us against each other. And they've been doing quite a bit of preparation to make sure that they're not going to have to worry about the American collapse. And when I say they, I mean government. They will be able to continue to operate. And to those law enforcement that keep going along with government and being brutal and corrupt, they're going to use you, and they're going to be safely tucked away. And I do see that happening. Here's one out of InfoWars. You can find it on the Alex Jones channel on YouTube. This one's the Treasury purchased thousands of survival kits for bank examiners. And let me cue this up here. I'll just play it.
We also have another story up on Infowars.com. They know something. Why did the Treasury Department just purchase thousands of survival kits for bank examiners? They're going in, they're going to spend $200,000 to get about 3,800 kits. And listen to the stuff they're putting out. The banks are turning into preppers. They've got a fanny pack that's going to hold all this stuff. They've got a 2,400 calorie food bar, a 3-pack, 8-ounce water, 50 water purification tablets. They've got 2 aspirins, 2 ibuprofens, 2 decongestant tablets. I mean, and this, don't forget this. They've got a whistle with a lanyard. See, that's what you blow when the guy with a gun takes all that stuff from you. Because this isn't really going to do them much good. But it's pretty amazing that the bankers think that they need to send this out. And, of course, it's all going to the big 7 or 8 banks. These survival kits will be delivered to every major bank in the U.S., Bank of America, American Express Bank, Capital One, Citicorp, J.P. Morgan, Chase, Wells Fargo, the usual suspects are all going to get their survival kits. Actually, it's amazing how much the CIA is like the Federal Reserve. In both cases, they appear to be under the control of the government, and yet they are the ones who are actually controlling the government. That appearance of control is merely where the facade government, the visual government, this propped-up, phony government, has a hearing and appoints the head of the Federal Reserve or the head of the CIA. After that, there's no auditing of anything that they do. Nobody's going to go to jail no matter what they do. Everything they do is in the dark. It's in the secret. And they're going to basically get away with everything that they've done over the last 10, 15 years. Nobody is going to go to jail. And, the only person, actually there was one person who went to jail, of course. And his name's not in the report. He was the whistleblower who blew the whistle on the torture. He went to jail. He's still in jail. And nobody else is going to jail. We've seen that before, haven't we? Haven't we seen that before? I just did a interview on Monday night, talking to someone who has made the connection between the mortgage pump and dump and tracking it all the way through, the money being channeled through Swiss banks. Of course, we've talked in the past about whistleblowers exposing money laundering by the biggest banks, and they get a slap on the wrist fine from the Justice Department. The Justice Department says that they're too big to jail, just like they're too big to fail, but it goes beyond that. He's got some contacts in the intelligence community that say that this is they're actually funding the black ops. Of course they are. CIA is funding their black ops with the drug war. We've pointed that out over and over again. yet nothing happens to them. But in many respects, the two of them are exactly the same.
You are watching the best of the Alex Jones Show.
We have them purchasing survival kits. We will see more of survival kits preparation, which we've already seen the start of. When we've seen all these departments buying up ammo and guns, you're going to see departments buying up survival kits. The supposed underground city out in the Ozarks, which I've seen pretty good evidence for it. Pretty credible source, I believe. And we have a nation that is really on a teetering point. Who do you think is worried? That's why prepping, I think, is one of the most essential things that you should do. If you are to do one thing, you need to go prep. Now, if you want to find good deals on supplies, one way of doing that is to shop through UCY and access the Amazon store, where you can buy products that you would normally buy on Amazon for the same great price, but UCY will get a portion of those profits to help support this network. It's a way you can buy the same goods you would buy if you went directly to Amazon, but just go to ucy.tv, and right there in the top toolbar, you see UCY store tab. Click on that, and UCY has put together a great selection of gear to prep for, everything to a nuclear fallout. Testing gear and prepping gear, great source, I believe, for prepping. And, check out Prepper Chicks and all the other great broadcasts here on UCY. Many of them talk about things you need to know to survive in a lot of different ways. I talk about, bartering and Bitcoin or gold and silver. I think Bitcoin's a way to have something, even if you don't make it something you do transactions in every day. If you have a little Bitcoin stored on a little thumb drive, enough where, let's say you had to flee the country because it was getting so oppressive. It was becoming a eugenics police state, where they were coming around rounding up people they believe undesirable and sterilizing them and testing on people. And you never knew what was coming around the corner. You need to get out of the country, and you can't. U.S. dollar is not worth anything. You can't sit there and just haul that gold and silver that you've collected, because, that's just going to slow you down. A little thumb drive with Bitcoin, if there's other countries you can get to where Bitcoin is still being used, you'll be able to have a little wealth stored. It's always a option. It might not always turn out to be the most viable option, but it is something that I believe is good for preparation. And that's why I say never put all your eggs in one basket. You have to be very diverse in what you put your wealth into. It's getting to the point that I think people really need to start investing heavily in their future financially and preparationally, where you have what you need to survive a collapse, but in a financial way where you've invested in multiple things that have the potential to keep your wealth growing, not just stagnant, but growing. I don't hate on anybody for putting their money in anything they truly believe can be a success. Because I'm not an expert on finance and all that, but I do see where people put their money all in one place and lose it. Even when it comes to, maybe a 401k, I've seen people lose it. And that's why I like gold and silver. I believe gold and silver, it's lasted this many, decades, centuries. It's something that will prove to have value in the end. It's just one of those things. No matter what people have used other than gold, gold always tends to come out on top. And you see that with the way China is building their gold reserves. And they're allowing their citizens to build gold reserves. And when they pull that peg, like Peter Schiff said, it's going to rock the U.S., I think, in a way that we didn't see coming. Well, I seen coming, you probably seen coming, but the unaware populace have no idea about. They have no idea what that would do to our economy, to our way of life. And that's what people that have talked out about the Federal Reserve have talked out about, taking the dollar off the gold. We don't back our dollar by anything. It's all been a scam. And we've talked about it, and nothing's been done about it. Ron Paul had been in Congress talking about it for how long? Nothing has been done. And when it happens, they're going to go, we've never seen this happening, coming. We don't understand how it happened. And it's going to be BS. It's going to be total BS. Because people have been warning about it. In the end, they will probably be well off, benefited from the crash, more than likely. It tends to be what happens. They played their cards knowing what would actually happen, therefore they benefit from it. They constructed the fell. They know what's going to happen, when it's going to happen, and they just put their money where they need it. Okay. I've seen one here from Pigmine, if I can find it. Thought I did. having problems here. Okay. I was getting ready to restart my browser and start working again. Oh, excuse me there. Now, I'm going to get into kind of some of the police state, how it stands right now. Eric Garner apparently isn't the only one to die from some type of asthma attack. Here out of Pigmind 6 on YouTube. Man dies from asthma attack after cops stops them rushing to hospital. I'm not going to play it, but this cop stops him and sits there, and it's one of those things that we've seen the point where there's been people that have been detained for time when, you know, I've seen one where a cop pulled a man out of the car for speeding. He's trying to tell the cop something, the cop's roughing him up a little bit. He's like, my wife's pregnant. Well, she's going into the labor. And the cop's sitting there kind of looking at him dazed. Huh? My wife, she's in labor. Oh, you're still getting a ticket. Like, really? Oh, yeah. Still needs a ticket. I'm just having all kinds of problems trying to get this browser to work. That's why I don't want to play that. It's just freaking out on me here. Now, during all these protests, you know, I warned about the provocateurs. I said, stay away from provocateurs. Well, they caught some undercover cops. This out of RT America, you know, they found, it wasn't RT America that found them, but protesters caught already once protesters that weren't protesters. They were undercover cops, and then they called them out at another protest, and then they called out these two. And what happened at this one is these undercover cops end up slamming one guy to the ground and starts pointing the gun at marchers and independent journalists. I'm going to play this from RT. Hopefully this works without my browser messing up.
A stunning story out of California where an undercover California Highway Patrol officer pulled a gun during a protest in Oakland. The officer pointed that gun after the crowd recognized that he was a cop. The question is, was he acting as an agent provocateur? RT correspondent Lindsay France is covering this story for us from Los Angeles. Lindsay, okay, so a couple of details here. My understanding is that the CHP officer and another second officer were actually marching with the crowd, their faces covered, and people thought they were trying to infiltrate the crowd. Is that right?
Well, yeah, the CHP has been working with Berkeley and Oakland police since November 24th, infiltrating crowds. They've got Twitter accounts. They're keeping abreast of instant messages where there's instant message lists, for lack of a better term. So they are sort of a part of keeping their ear to the ground of what's happening, not to prevent the protests, but to prevent the vandalism and the storming of the freeways. So these three agencies have worked together since the 24th. So these officers, when they heard a call went out, they could hear on the radios that a T-Mobile and an ATM were being vandalized. Not only that, but the protesters had turned toward the freeway. They saw one group splinter off, which Ben, I know you've been in protests aplenty where they splinter off into different groups. In this case, one was a peaceful protest, and then they saw a different group splinter off. That's where they got out of the car that they had been following the group in, got into the crowd to sort of hear what was going on, to see where they were going to go, and that's when they were identified as cops. And not sure at this point how they were identified as cops. At that point, they turned to walk away when one of them was grabbed and punched. And then that's when the struggle began.
Now, a couple of things here. KTVU, which is one of the stations out there in California, is reporting that witnesses say that these guys were actually marching with the crowd and that they started banging on windows and started inciting the crowd. And that's when people started saying that they were agent provocateurs or police officers. And the witnesses claim that that's when these guys walked away. I guess CHP is denying that's the case?
Yeah, so these are sort of words coming from the protesters on the ground saying that these guys had been a part of the protests and that they had been stirring up trouble. No way really to verify if that's true or not. It's a case of they said that, and these two officers said. So it's very difficult to verify that. However, according to California Highway Patrol, these officers had been following in a car all night long, hadn't left the car until the call went out that these two places were being vandalized. That's when they got toward the crowd on the periphery, and then when they were recognized as cops, they had been at the protests for a couple of days, and so when people were kind of pointing at them, shouting, "Cop, cop," it's when they turned around, and that's when one of their hoods was pulled down, he was punched to the ground, and essentially that's what happened. So as far as them being agent provocateurs, that might be said. They may have, there may be rumors that they were insiders, although California Highway Patrol strongly denies that this was ever the case.
Certainly so. You mentioned about the hood being pulled down. Also, some of the reports claim they were wearing bandanas. There is a witness who claims and told KTVU that he pulled the bandana off the officer's face and that the officer then punched a black man standing next to him. The guy who says he grabbed the bandana says, "I'm white." A guy next to me who was black was punched in the face, and the black man was arrested. And then what do we know about why the officer then pulled the gun and apparently pointed it at a photographer? Is that correct?
Well, they were being surrounded by a group of, they said, about 40 or 50 individuals. So what happened, according to the officers, was when they were walking away, these guys who were a part of the crowd went up to them, and one of them was wearing a bandana. They were dressed just like your typical protester in this sort of a situation, hoodies, thick coats, bandana. They were pulled away from them and said, "Are you the cops? Are you the cops?" That's when these guys just started to walk away to get away from the crowd. One was punched to the ground. That's when his partner pulled out a baton and said, "We're law enforcement, step away, step away." The crowd continued to come at them. At that point, this man said he feared for his life. He pulled his gun out and at the entire crowd, which at protests, half the crowd is media, and said, "Get away." And that's when they got the guy who had punched them on the ground and got him arrested, and he's now in jail. So, yes, probably a photographer was pointed at because everyone there seems to be a photographer. But not only that, I saw the same article you did with the guy who says, "I'm white, I wasn't arrested, a black guy was arrested." These stories go all throughout the crowd. So again, there's no way to verify if this is true or not. And of course, the protesters say also, well, if they were in plain clothes, we would respect that. Well, would you really? I mean, they would also say, well, what are cops doing around here? We're just protesting. But some of them aren't. And that's the cops' argument is we're there to infiltrate, to make sure people who stop the freeways and who vandalize aren't going to get away with it.
Yeah, absolutely. And then on the other side of it, you have protesters who say they're actually dressed like this because they are there to instigate, not just to infiltrate. But Lindsay France from our RT studio, interesting discussion. Thank you very much.
Now, I don't know. It's one of those things when they start pointing guns. It starts becoming something different. Give me a second here. When they are caught many times, I know I seen the marches. I think it was in Canada, where the ones were rooted out that they were the Black Bloc Party or whatever they call themselves, the anarchists that destroy things all the time, and they were all wearing police boots and went back to a vehicle and undressed after everything turned violent. And then that's what the media covered. Didn't cover any of the peaceful protests and didn't really cover who did it. They covered that protests were violent. Showed cars being set on fire. Windows broken out. And if I remember right, that the alternative media widely showed all the evidence that showed, hey, these cops are the ones that instigated everything. Infiltrating, they already go around and collect all your data. They know what's going on. They don't need to infiltrate to figure all that stuff out. You got to remember all this is being kind of conducted. If the protesters are getting information that we're going this direction, then the cops get it. Why do they then need to get on the ground? The protesters are tired of being caught up in the violence too, I believe. Hopefully they are trying to keep it nonviolent. Because what happened in Ferguson, that was a shame to watch them have their community burnt down after, all this tension from the shooting. It didn't help anything. When you see them do it in a way that the public can get behind, that's when you're going to make an effect. But when you want the public to get behind, you can't make it about race because it really isn't about race. It's about poverty versus the non-poverty. And that gap is widened, even though there's been many that have moved up in society. A lot of the ones that were moving up in society when it came to going from a poverty into middle class that were bumped back down don't see a chance to even get back up to, the middle class. The people in poverty don't see a chance to move towards the middle class. And if all of this with China, our economy, oil, all of this comes to a head, I think that's a fear that should be looked at. And that doesn't mean that you stop trying. I believe no matter what, give it all you have. If this economy is going down, give it all you have. Because in the end, we have to shape our future. Because we know government's not going to help us along that path. We don't have a government that's going to provide for us the way we can provide for ourselves with our innovation. Our innovation has slowed to a point where even though we have great ideas, it's hard to capitalize on it because, the big corporations are going to end up capitalizing on it first. And that seems to be what's happening. That really does seem to be what's happening. Okay. I'm having some issues again. Everything just froze up. Browser is not responding. Catastrophic failure. No, I'm just fine. Hopefully it all pops back up here. Bam, there it goes. I have a article that kind of goes along with that, and it's from copblock.org. Not only did this happen that night, says here on this article, minutes following the ordeal, a cop watch and Bay Area Infida contributor was arrested at gunpoint while questioning the identity of two masked individuals walking down the alley. Says at this point, it can be assumed that the use of plainclothes officers at Oakland demos is transcending traditional surveillance. This month alone, there has been multiple accounts of officers making their identity more overt and even making physical contact with people. And they got pictures, video. It's pretty evident that they are infiltrating, and I always say there's definitely a chance for violence if you have the cops in there, because you don't know if they're in there to have their ears on the ground or they're in there to start violence. And that's why they should ever be plainclothes in part of that. Okay. I have one here out of Liberty Beat, and this one just, we constantly see the same thing over and over and over again. LibertyBeat.com. Liberty Beat exclusive former CPS victim turns agency on Austin homeschool family. An Austin homeschool family is under scrutiny from the Texas Department of Family and Protective Services after their friend, a local activist, accused the parents of theft, among other allegations. What started as a dispute over lost money quickly escalated with frantic text messages, fake social media profiles, and to the great dismay of the Gore family, the inclusion of the Texas Department of Family and Protective Services. On December 5th, 2014, Ben Gore heard a knock at the door of the extended stay hotel where he and his wife Jessica, along with their 4 kids, had been staying. The person knocking was a social worker with the Texas version of Child Protective Services. The social worker informed Ben that her office had received a complaint and that she needed to see the home and the children. Ben refused entry to the woman as she did not have a warrant, but he did allow her to look at the children in the hallway of the hotel. Among the allegations in the complaint were drug use, having a 6-year-old homeschooled with no curriculum, abuse and neglect of the children and others. The social worker later indicated on the telephone to Jessica that while she did not see evidence of abuse and the home appeared clean and orderly from the door, she still needed to move forward, and the next steps would be to interview the parents, perform drug tests, inspect the home, and video record interviews with the children. The social worker admitted that they videotaped the children so they don't have to be traumatized more than once. The moment Ben realized who was standing at the door, he knew who it was that had involved the state. During the 24 days prior to the CPS visit, Gore family had been providing free housing to their friend Ben Keller, who was in need of a place to stay, as he relayed in a day-by-day narrative of the events leading up to the CPS visit. Written by Jessica Gore 4 days prior to the CPS visit, the Keller began complaining of having lost money. The Gores helped their guests look for the money for several hours and eventually found a crumpled up money envelope outside of the hotel window. It was speculated that Gore's son may have thrown the envelope out the window along with some other items. Upon the hotel manager's review of CCTV footage, he found nothing conclusive showing someone having taken money from the envelope. At this point, the Gore family left the hotel to run errands and returned to find that their guest had gathered his belongings and left without notice. Then the text messages. Later that day, Ben Keller began sending text messages demanding $760 from the Gore family, threatening to call police. One text message wrote, "Mostly I want money as fast as I can get it. I didn't want to involve the police, but I'm not above it." Others said, "We can figure out a way to recover the $760. Or can we figure out a way to recover the $760? The next phrase won't be fun for anyone. I'm not stupid. You obviously think you are smarter than you are. Enjoy jail. Warrant is coming. And have fun in jail. Maybe you can use my money for bail." In addition to sending the text message, Ben Keller began creating fake social media profiles and further harassing the Gore family, which they provide screenshots here at thelibertybeat.com. After the barrage of messages, the Gore family expected to soon be talking with a police detective. Much to their surprise, the first government official they would encounter was someone more concerned with their children than investigating an alleged theft. What makes this story all the more heartbreaking is that Ben Keller has also been investigated by the CPS, an investigation that eventually ended in the separation of his newborn daughter and her parents, and shortly thereafter the tragic loss of her life under the care of his brother. And as ordered by the CPS, Ben Keller's CPS story can be read here. Keller, who called the authorities before seeking arbitration or other means of redressing his grievances besides government, and government has participated in subjecting another family to the cycle of coercion and intervention that he and his family were put through. It remains to be seen how this encounter will turn out. We can only hope yet another family is not torn apart at the hands of the state like so many have before. For now, the Gore family is in need of support. They received an email from the social worker yesterday stating she will be following up with the children tomorrow. Since the Gores have not yet secured legal assistance, the family has set up a GoFundMe fundraising account for the purpose of paying a lawyer, a retainer to help them navigate the legal waters when dealing with CPS. And they got a link here. So go check out the LibertyBeat.com. Former CPS victim turns agency on local homeschool family. And there are links. You can read the rest of that article there. Information that we need to get out because even under some of the circumstances that families are under that might not be the best circumstances for the children, we tend to see that CPS and government hands are even worse places for the children. They don't do good. They go, it's for the children. We're here to protect the children. Let's stick them in a worse condition, which makes absolutely no sense. And anybody that remotely believes anything the CPS or these government agencies say, they're fooling themselves. These agencies never do any good for these children. I mean, we've seen children that have been taken out of extremely bad situations just to be placed in another extremely bad situation. Doesn't help the children. They don't know what they're doing. And in some cases, they might know what they're doing and they might be getting away with some heavy corruption. I think there's a lot more that should be looked into when it comes to a lot of these child theft agencies out there. Because that's really what it is. They're stealing children from families for something that really hasn't even been proven in most cases. There's no proof that they're doing anything wrong, but they still end up getting ripped from their families, and it can be years of ordeal to try to even get them back. Never actually being convicted or charged with anything. That's theft of the children from the families. Well, I hope you found some of this information interesting and maybe help you along in prepping, because we know not everything is going to last. And, you know, maybe there might be something else that happens. But if we keep our minds open and look at all the information that is happening, it's all right there. You know, when you see the oil wars, the currency wars, you know what's at stake. You have chances to prepare. Whether, you know, you put a little money here in Bitcoin, a little money here in gold, a little money in silver, you know, a little money in seeds and other things. All of this matters. So prepare for the worst and hope for the best. And don't stop trying to better yourselves and better your family. Take care. I'll see you next week. Stay tuned here on ECY.TV. Later.